Maria Titizian.
And I'm Rubina Margosian, and this is the Week in Review.
Every week, we bring you the stories shaping Armenia and the region.
From politics and policy to social issues and conflict, we break down the news and what it means for you.
This week in the news, 2 teenagers from Syunik region accidentally cross into Azerbaijani territory. France opens an honorary consulate in Syunik's town of Goris. And tensions between Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and the church flare up once again. These stories and more in our weekly roundup of the news.
Armenia's National Security Service reported that 2 teenagers from the Syunik region accidentally crossed into Azerbaijani territory. Both boys are underage, about 17 years old, both from the village of Ter. They went missing in the early hours of June 6 near the village of Aravuz. It appears they lost their way in the terrain and ended up across the border. The NSS, this is the National Security Service, says all necessary measures are being taken to locate the teens and ensure their safe return.
The Azerbaijani military continues to fire in the direction of Armenian villages in Syunik, especially Khanadzakh and Khoznavar. This has become a regular occurrence for more than 2 months now. Edvard Asaryan, chief of the Armenian Army's General Staff, confirmed that shots were fired, but says that they were not targeted. He added that the Defense Ministry reports only shots that are specifically targeted. Asaryan argued that the Azerbaijani gunfire is aimed at putting what he said was psychological pressure on villagers and soldiers, which the Armenian side does not pay attention to, and continues normal service at the border.
Meanwhile, Armenia's National Security Service reported that a meeting took place this week between representatives of the commissions dealing with the issues of missing persons from Armenia and Azerbaijan. The sides addressed humanitarian issues related to clarifying the fate of those who went missing during the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. They also explored ways to exchange information and to organize and coordinate search operations. Both sides emphasized the importance of ongoing dialogue in the humanitarian sphere and reaffirmed their willingness to stay in contact for the sake of the families of the missing. NSS Chief Armen Abazian said this was the second such meeting, adding that a preliminary agreement has been reached to ensure efforts continue and start joint search operations. He described the meeting as positive but did not say when search operations might begin. He also commented on the return of POWs and detainees, noting that work is being done, though it's unclear when there will be concrete results.
And this week, Armenia's Foreign Minister Arat Mirzoyan also addressed the issue of Armenian prisoners of war and detainees still being held in Baku. He called these cases, quote, a painful and important part of the broader agenda, stressing that humanitarian concerns remain at the heart of the post-conflict process. But Mirzoyan admitted this is one of the few areas where constructive dialogue with Azerbaijan has been nearly impossible. There's no good news to report, he told journalists. Still, he expressed hope that if a final peace agreement is reached and if regional infrastructure is unblocked and relations begin to move forward, a more favorable environment will emerge, one that could allow these unresolved humanitarian issues to be finally addressed. Meanwhile, Ruben Vartanyan's lawyer, Abraham Berman, issued a statement challenging the legal basis of the charges brought against his client. He argued that the indictment does not adequately reflect core principles of criminal law. In his view, the prosecution has failed to demonstrate a clear causal link between Vartanyan's actions and the alleged consequences and has not sufficiently established the required intent behind each charge. Berman emphasized that criminal liability must be based on individual responsibility, legal certainty, and respect for international obligations. He warned that any failure to uphold these standards casts serious doubt on the fairness and legality of the case. He called on Azerbaijan's judiciary to ensure a fair trial and respect its international commitments, stating that doing so would strengthen confidence in the country's legal system and show that justice can prevail, even in the most politically sensitive cases.
And France opened an honorary consulate in the town of Goris in the southern region of Syunik on June 2nd. The opening ceremony was attended by the French ambassador, the mayor of Goris, the governor of Syunik, and Deputy Foreign Minister Vahan Kostanyan. Kostanyan called it a truly important political statement by France. He described the consulate as being mainly about political representation and symbolic significance. Paris had initially announced its plans to open representation in Syunik in 2023. Earlier in October of 2022, Iran had opened a consulate in Kapan, the regional capital of Syunik, while Russia declared its intention to follow suit. This was in 2023, but Moscow's plans have yet to materialize. According to Moscow, Yerevan seems reluctant in the matter. And Franco-Armenian ties have increased greatly in recent years with high-profile security cooperation. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot stated during his visit to Yerevan last month that the two countries are set to formalize their strategic ties in a document.
And U.S. Senator Steve Daines visited Yerevan this week, voicing support for a peace deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan. He also discussed U.S. critical mineral investments with Prime Minister Pashinyan and highlighted the potential regional benefits of a peace agreement. Daines then traveled to Baku, where he met with President Aliyev and senior officials to discuss boosting U.S.-Azerbaijan economic ties. He also met with Israel's ambassador to discuss regional cooperation. Meanwhile, U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Energy Alicia Duncan met with Armenian officials to advance cooperation on nuclear energy and critical minerals. Ambassador Kavian, this is the U.S. ambassador, attended the launch of a $3.4 million simulator to enhance safety at the Medzamor nuclear power plant, a key part of the U.S.-Armenia energy partnership. Armenia is now considering U.S.-made small modular reactors to eventually replace Medzamor as part of ongoing negotiations for a civil nuclear agreement with the United States.
Also this week, Armenia hosted a regular session of the working groups overseeing its cooperation with NATO. The meetings focused on assessing progress made under the planning and review process, which helps coordinate Armenia's partnership with the alliance. Officials from Armenia's Ministries of Defense and Foreign Affairs, along with other government agencies and NATO representatives, took part in the discussions. Meanwhile, Azerbaijan's defense ministry announced that its armed forces took part in NATO's Steadfast Defender 2025 military exercise in Bulgaria. According to the ministry statement, the goal of the drills was to improve the skills of commanders and staff in operational settings.
And on June 3, during a regional visit to the South Caucasus, representatives of 8 Nordic and Baltic states held meetings with Pashinyan, the prime minister, and other officials. In a joint statement, they reiterated their joint commitment to strengthening relations and expanding political dialogue and economic cooperation with Armenia, and expressed their full support for Armenia's ambition to further deepen partnership with the European Union. They also welcomed the draft peace agreement with Azerbaijan and the Crossroads of Peace initiative. The group of 8 northern European states, including Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, Norway, and Sweden, first initiated collective support for Armenia last December, when they affirmed their interest in strengthening relations and supporting Armenia's ambition to deepen ties with the EU. Speakers and deputy speakers of these countries visited Yerevan back in January.
And this week, the leaders of Armenia and Turkey held a telephone conversation. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan congratulated Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on the occasion of Kurban Bayram. Erdogan, in turn, congratulated Pashinyan on Armenia being selected to host the European Political Community Summit in spring of 2026. The two leaders discussed Armenia-Turkey relations and regional developments and agreed to continue their dialogue. Since 2022, Pashinyan has been congratulating Erdogan on Kurban Bayram, while Erdogan usually sends greetings on the occasion of Armenia's Vartavar holiday. The two countries have also agreed on a number of steps to normalize relations, which have yet to be realized, including opening the land border for third country citizens and holders of diplomatic passports, assessing the situation of the Gümrük Railway, and restoring the historic Ani Bridge.
And the head of the Russian State Duma, Valentina Matvienko, is in Armenia on an official visit, during which she met with the prime minister, her Armenian counterpart Alen Simonian, and other officials. On June 6, Matvienko and Simonian chaired the 39th meeting of the Interparliamentary Commission on Cooperation between the Armenian and Russian parliaments. Both speakers emphasized the importance of the Commission's effective work in strengthening cooperation and friendship between the two countries.
And in local news, tensions between Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and the Armenian Apostolic Church have flared up once again. Last week, Pashinyan criticized the condition of some churches in Armenia, claiming that certain sites are being used as storage rooms where people dump unwanted items. He later took to social media to question the celibacy of high-ranking clergy, including Archbishop Bagrat Galastanian, who led last year's protests, and even Catholicos Garegin II himself. The Prime Minister went on to say that the Armenian government should have a decisive say in the election of the Catholicos of all Armenians. In his view, candidates for the position must undergo a vetting process to ensure their integrity, adding that this issue needs to be resolved once and for all. He also stated that any clergyman who has broken their vow of celibacy should step away from a spiritual service. While he acknowledged that no one's personal life is anyone else's business, he insisted that people still have a right to a church that upholds moral and spiritual values.
And Rubina, you were away last week, away from this. I don't know what to call it. I mean, they're accusing the Catholicos of having a child, and they've even published photos of this alleged daughter, and it's just been this sparring back and forth all week. I don't even know what to say, to be honest, but the Supreme Spiritual Council, led by the Catholicos, issued a strongly worded statement this week accusing the Prime Minister of launching a campaign against the Armenian Apostolic Church. They condemned his language recently as insulting, unlawful, and unbecoming of a statesman, saying it disrespects the church, violates basic civil norms, and offends the faithful. The council described the attacks as politically motivated, aimed at silencing the church, diminishing its role in public life, and serving the interests of anti-Armenian forces, even echoing Azerbaijani propaganda. They insisted church matters fall under ecclesiastical, not political authority, and called on the government to stop what they described as harmful and unlawful agenda.
Well, if the government succeeds in vetting the judges, maybe then we can talk about this.
So vetting other positions.
Finance Minister Vahe Hovhannisyan stated during a parliamentary committee hearing on the implementation of the 2024 state budget that last year Armenia's economy grew by 5.9%, slightly below the government's target of 7%. The minister also highlighted that Armenia's GDP per capita has increased. In 2023, it stood at 3.2 million drams. This is about $8,125. And in 2004, it rose to roughly 3.3 million drams. This is $8,500.
And in other news, I find this to be absurd, Rup, but here we go. Arms dealer David Galistyan has donated aviation equipment worth 30 million dirhams. This is about $78,000 to the Defense Ministry. The government formally accepted the donation during this week's cabinet meeting. The specific type of equipment was not disclosed as the decision was approved without discussion and was not included in the public agenda. Known by his nickname Badron Davo, Galistyan is facing criminal charges for supplying the military with faulty weapons and is involved in two separate criminal cases. One case involves former Defense Minister David Donoyan. The other relates to former Minister of Defense Seyran Ohanyan, under whose tenure the same type of missiles were delivered. These were the faulty missiles, right? And so here we go again. And back in 2022, Galistyan reimbursed the state for the full amount of the damages that he is accused of causing. This was, just let's go into this number, 2.7 billion dirhams. This is about $6.7 million US. I just want to know how somebody has that kind of money.
Arms dealer.
Arms dealer.
Well, Yerevan City Hall says it won't be able to buy 30 out of the 45 new trolleybuses it had promised this year due to lower than expected revenues. The city spokesperson warned that even the remaining 50 may be at risk if the budget shortfall continues. Between January and April, the city brought in 22 billion drams, about 3.5 billion short of its target. Most of the gap came from the public transport sector. Officials blamed resistance to a proposed fare hike and said they're also considering a fine system to raise funds, though that would require approval from parliament.
After weeks of delay at the Georgian border, 52 Armenian trucks carrying alcoholic beverages, mostly cognac, or brandy, I guess, were finally allowed to continue on to Russia. Economy Minister Gevorg Baboyan announced the trucks had been held up for over a month due to quality inspections, prompting protests in Yerevan outside the Georgian embassy. Although Armenia and Georgia had initially agreed to let 33 trucks through on June 5, the final number rose to 52. Baboyan said 72 trucks are still stuck in Georgia, and officials hope to resolve their status within 5 days. A planned visit by Georgia's agriculture minister to discuss the matter was cancelled at the last minute, with Tbilisi citing scheduling issues.
Meanwhile, Russian authorities have once again raised concerns over imports from Armenia. Russia's agricultural watchdog says there has been a rise in violations involving plant products coming from Armenia. The agency warns that fresh flowers and buds considered high-risk quarantine items could spread pests and threaten both local plant health and Russia's flower industry. It noted that flower imports from Armenia have jumped nearly 50% compared to the same period in 2024. The agency also criticized Armenia's import controls, calling them ineffective.
And Gohar Abadjian, the spouse of Foreign Minister Arat Mirzoyan, has been appointed head of Enterprise Armenia, a government-run investment agency designed to assist both foreign and local investors in establishing and expanding businesses in the country. The organization operates under the Ministry of Economy, while its board of trustees is chaired by the Prime Minister and includes several government members, including Mirzoyan himself. Concerns about a potential conflict of interest were dismissed by Pashinyan's chief of staff, Armeniy Harutyunyan, who said that the appointment was objective. He said that Abadjian went through the application process and was selected following a final interview. According to her LinkedIn profile, Abadjian most recently served as a senior technical program manager at NVIDIA from August 2024 until now. It also lists extensive experience in the IT sector in recent years. And, as always, we discuss the articles that we've published this week. And today we published the May EVN Security Report by Nerses Kopalian. It's called The Quartet and Securitized Minilateralism, France, India, Poland, and Armenia's New Security Paradigm. And so he's basically looking at these four countries together and what that would look like in a security alliance and what might such a quartet mean for Armenia's security architecture. So he introduces this concept of securitized minilateralisms, and actually it was a very interesting concept, and we'll be publishing the podcast with him next week. But definitely worth the read.
And we have a column by Maria Kungo, as we do usually once a month. It's called Symbols or Spectacle, Armenia's Pavilions at Venice and Milan. It's a critical reflection on Armenia's national pavilions at the 2025 Triennale Milano and Venice Biennale of Architecture. Maria Kungo explores how they navigate themes of heritage, technology, and everyday architecture, offering contrasting visions of authenticity, identity, and the politics of representation.
And next in the series, and I think this is the last one that we have by Asri Karabedyan about the prison system and the issues and challenges faced by inmates. And this one was about medication shortages and inadequate treatment. She says that inmates in Armenia's prison system describe a pattern of medical neglect, medication shortages, and systemic delays. So she basically investigates the failures of prison healthcare based on first-hand accounts and reports, and the government's reluctance to respond publicly to these issues.
And from our creative tech section, we have an article by David Manukyan, a first-time contributor. It's titled Armenia's Tech Sector in 2025, Snapshot of the Ecosystem. Armenia's tech sector is scaling rapidly, contributing to around 7% of the GDP and drawing global attention. David Manukyan, however, highlights key trends from the 2025 Tech Market Insights report that reveal a complex ecosystem filled with both success stories and challenges.
And finally, Sheila Pailan's column, Unleashed. This one is called To Be Sure. And it had a lot of people agreeing with the sentiments reflected there. She looks at her own struggle with, imposter syndrome and the weight of, inherited trauma, the seduction of Armenian exceptionalism, right? Because we are always saying that, we are exceptional people.
We're not?
No. So through the lens of identity and confidence, she calls for both an individual and collective shift from needing to be seen as exceptional to doing the work of becoming truly excellent and hopefully one day exceptional. So that's the kind of week we've had here in Armenia. Thank you for listening. Have a safe and peaceful weekend, and we will be back again next week.